I would say 80% of the worst case scenarios that I've thought about in the last 10 years have occurred. That's my fear, that we're going in this unstoppable train towards the worst possible scenarios that we can imagine.
It starts quietly. A van idling too long outside your building. A neighbor disappears. A text thread goes dark. Then one morning, the door gets kicked in, and suddenly, you're a suspect in your own neighborhood. Not because you did anything wrong, but because of who you are and where you were born, what papers you do or don't have. We are living in a country that's building modern-day concentration camps, rebranding them as border control and a stand-in for the justice system, weaponizing cruelty as political theater. And while everyone is busy splitting hairs over whether or not the president's cankles are terminal, ICE is raiding neighborhoods and rounding up families. So today, we're asking, if this is how we treat the people holding our country together, or any people at all for that matter, how is this better? This episode isn't about what might happen. It's about what is already happening. Mass deportations, family separations, the rollback of birthright citizenship, and all of it backed by a strategy called Project 2025, which is exactly what it sounds like, a blueprint for dismantling democracy and targeting marginalized communities under the guise of law and order. The policies and strategies to achieve them laid out in it are so sinister that Donald Trump had to lie to the American people on numerous occasions, insisting that it was not his plan.
As you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it.
But it was and is the only plan he's implementing currently. According to analysis from Hearst Television Data Team, nearly 45% of the non-tariff-related executive actions from Trump so far align directly with the plans in Project 2025.
The Trump administration was very clear about their intentions from day one. In fact, I would say from 2016, they were very clear under the first administration. They were just not effective at implementing their agenda back in 2016 through 2020.
This is Justino Mora. He's an immigrants' rights activist, software engineer, and a fellow USC MacArthur Foundation Civic Media Fellow. I wanted to talk to him because he's been in this fight now for more than a decade.
I do have to say that personally, I think it took me a little bit by surprise how quickly they moved to this phase. I did think it was going to take them maybe about a year or so, or maybe about a year to 2 years to attack specifically U.S. citizenship. As far as the raids, as far as the attacks on undocumented individuals, I thought most likely they're going to have to deliver within the first 100 days.
Right.
Mostly because that's typically what every administration tries to do. Personally, it's tough because I have, friends, family members who are undocumented, who don't have a legal status, may have TPS, DACA, or legal permanent residence. And then also, I guess, as a community organizer, someone that has been trying to, raise the alarm for quite a while that this was a serious threat. It's tough because we're now saying, we told you so.
No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here. No hate, no fear.
There's so much we can do. Through social media. There's so much we can do through our own community efforts, but it feels reactive, that we're just responding to the attacks and not strategizing in a way that we can get ahead of whatever next attack might be coming, because they're adapting to whatever strategies we're implementing on a day-to-day basis.
What are the sort of main differences that you've noticed besides the speed with which they're implementing their plans?
I think it's the effectiveness that they're having, and also this multi-angle approach. They're using the most vulnerable populations in the United States as a testing ground to essentially try to destroy whatever democratic principles and constitutional rights that we have. And attacking only Black and brown immigrants, they know that perhaps the white population of the United States might not raise up and might not fight back as hard as they would if this was being done to white Americans. Of course, there's a lot of incredible white allies that are fighting out on the streets, that are getting involved. But I feel like from our point of view is they were going to attack Black and brown communities first and foremost. They've had this plan for quite a while, and they're now executing step by step. And they're going after those constitutionally protected rights because they know that if they can get away with not obeying and specifically respecting those constitutional rights of American-born citizens who are Black, Latino, etc., they'll be able to build the legal framework and the narrative to go after anyone. It doesn't matter who it is, after anyone who dares to confront them and fight back.
This time, the machinery is built, the levers are mapped, and the targets, immigrants, Black and brown citizens, and anyone who resists, are already on the board. And with the border czar, Tom Homan, claiming essentially that racial profiling is a fine way to decide who is and isn't in the U.S. legally.
People need to understand, ICE officers and Border Patrol, they don't need probable cause to walk up to somebody, briefly detain them, and question them. They just got through the observation, get articulable facts based on their location, their occupation, their physical appearance.
And the court's suggestion that they don't do that actually being impossible to implement, things are looking pretty bleak.
It comes down to aesthetics, actually, right? It's like, we got to de-brown the country. And so however we can do that, that seems to be their plan.
Yeah.
But then there's also that sort of sticky point of like, if he's just deciding who is and isn't a citizen, which is what he's doing now anyway, right? Like that's what we're doing, is sort of like testing ground different communities, being like, hey, do you guys care? Do you guys care if we just, yank people off the street? I hate to like be gloom and doom, but like history has shown us where this goes. And so as someone who I think really likes this country and wants it to be better, like what do you see happening in the future here?
I came to the US when I was 11 years old, and I found a lot of opportunities here that I wasn't able to find back home. So for me to see these current developments taking place, there's this side of me that thinks, I want to stay here and fight back. But then there's also the other side of me that tells me, do I really need to be here? This country is always promises the American dream and, sold me this idea since I came to the US, that if I did my best, that if I succeeded in school, that if I gave back to my community, doors would be open to me. And at least from my personal experience and that of other people, documented people that I know, that promise never fully materialized. And if it did for some individuals, it came at a huge cost. So when I think about the future of this country, where things are heading, I always consider the worst possible scenario. And it might be my, I guess, studying engineering, mathematics, and you're
gaming it out.
Yeah, exactly. I would say 80% of the worst case scenarios that I've thought about in the last 10 years have occurred. It's going to take people to, just, I would say, wake up and just get involved. We do have the numbers. If we really wanted to, we could really shut down the economy. Like, we can implement huge labor strikes. We could come out in huge numbers, protest, and fight back that way. I don't feel confident that we have the organizational structure. Like, membership for, on labor unions has been decreasing over the years. That's one, I guess, perfect example. That's one thing that also worries me, that now there's, of course, younger people that want to get involved, but also there's less structures for them to get involved in.
And communities are being tested right now across the country. ICE raids are happening at immigration hearings, at schools, farms, hotels, restaurants. Basically, every public space has become a place to be targeted if law enforcement decides you look like you don't belong. And people are being sent to countries all over the world, whether they're from there or not. What's worse is Florida, under the cruel direction of failed presidential candidate and current governor Ron DeSantis, has a state-sanctioned concentration camp that is making headlines and selling merch, even as ethical, moral, and safety questions persist.
We saw important conditions, a lot of crowding, 32 male individuals per cage. These people are being caged, 3 toilets per area, and the drinking water, it comes from the toilet apparatus in the cell.
So I want to talk about this Alligator Alcatraz thing for a moment, because to me, it is just the epitome of what is wrong with this administration, with the people who support it. They're selling merch. People want to take photos. This is a concentration camp that was thrown together shoddily, that is already flooded. People who have been able to see it in our government, who, don't support Trump have been very honest in saying, like, this is not humane. You know, there's a sign outside of the facility that calls it Alligator Alcatraz. Like, it's an official naming convention.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that Americans have become more cruel in the past decade? Does this seem like something that could have been possible in 2016? I guess, like, before the election, had he said, I want to make a place where I send all of the immigrants and then we can deport them to whatever country we want, and we would have a large concentration of them, that would have been supported? Or have we just lost our, like, empathy as a society?
I think we have lost our empathy as a society for many decades now, because at least when we analyze U.S. foreign policy, this is something that the U.S. government has done across the world. Perhaps we're losing empathy towards domestic individuals, domestic citizens, domestic people living in the United States. Alligator Alcatraz, definitely a concentration camp.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I've seen, I guess, quote unquote, these immigration centers. I've seen them as concentrations for a long time, mostly because I've met and talked to people who have been sexually abused in those places, both children and parents, people who have been tortured, like at the Adelanto Detention Center here in Southern California is a perfect example. I met undocumented immigrants who many, many years ago, they launched a hunger strike, and many of them were tortured in there by the immigration officials. And I feel like the focus now, it's happening now because there's a Republican in office. When there's a Democrat in office, there's less emphasis and let's focus on the human rights violations happening in detention centers. And I would say in any prison in the United States. I guess I could make the argument that Alligator Alcatraz is sort of like a blueprint of what El Salvador did with the Secots in their country. And now they're trying to replicate something similar in Florida and perhaps in other parts of the country. So that worries me because of the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, Alligator Alcatraz is like a state-run concentration camp. And most of them are actually federally run. And Alligator Alcatraz isn't. It's like a state-funded, led, constructed, maintained facility. And that raises the question, what can they get away with?
Right. Like, who's overseeing anything there?
Exactly. Yeah.
Historically, barring one recent high-profile case, federal custody at least came with a paper trail. Bad, but traceable. With state-sanctioned facilities, you create an environment where people can be disappeared without record. And we saw this play out recently. In July 2025, the Miami Herald obtained and published the records of some 700 inmates at Alligator Alcatraz. Many families of those interned had no clue that's where their loved ones ended up. And it has to be reiterated, the crime most of these individuals are being accused of is a civil infraction. Being in the US without citizenship is less serious than, say, running a stop sign, driving under the influence, and domestic assault, crimes that US citizens are more than 2 times as likely to be convicted of. And that's according to the state of Texas, the only state that tracks immigration status by crime type.
You think Stephen Miller is a white nationalist?
A white supremacist, I would say, because I believe his ideology is one of domination and control over people of color.
Who lives in your country determines what your country is. If you move the third world to the first world, eventually we become the third world.
That guy, who sort of looks like the creepy scientist who trapped Sally in Nightmare Before Christmas, is Stephen Miller, a political advisor to Donald Trump. Breitbart, the rightest of the right-wing media, called out his emails as being blatantly white supremacist. He said horrible things about basically everyone with a hint of melanin, and his small vision for this country is winning right now. The Supreme Court this year has paved the way to revoke birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution that was put in place to recognize the citizenship of freed enslaved Africans. That means essentially that the government can decide who is and isn't a citizen at a moment's notice. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, President Trump threatened Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship because he doesn't like her. My, how far we have fallen.
So what do you think his end game is? Is it just to make like a smaller, whiter nation that ultimately has less power in the world, to create such a divide that there's like, you know, so few people who have things and so many people who have nothing, and it's just like everyone who has stuff is white? Like, what do you think their plan is, or what the actual end game is?
I think it's to advance white supremacy and acquire more power. So maybe a few other things, but I do think as a whole, just based on the people they have in their administration, the public statements that they have made, also the attacks on Black and brown immigrant communities, I don't see raids happening in European undocumented communities.
Yeah, Russian.
Yeah.
There's plenty of Russian people who are here undocumented. There are plenty of people of every race who are here undocumented. And you don't see that in white neighborhoods.
So I think it's one, pushing the white supremacist agenda, and then also acquiring more power in whatever means they think it's necessary, either financial, monetary personal gain, military power. I feel like it's a combination of those things. Relative to the first Trump administration, this time around, I do feel more concerned about my activism and how I advocate publicly. So that I do have to admit. And I feel like it's true, for a lot of immigrant rights organizers. And I am concerned about the ramifications of being public online. But I guess I'm already public.
I guess, yeah, that's a good point. They could just look at the history of the fact that you posted.
Yeah, so that's one piece. The question is, if I were to do some sort of community organizing or build tools that were to become very effective at preventing ICE raids, et cetera, it would probably move me from the bottom of the target list, probably higher.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that it's in my mind. And also just thinking about the new bill that passed. I call it the big, ugly bill.
It is. It's really ugly. It's horrible.
Yeah. And the funding, historical funding that is going to go towards DHS, ICE, CBP to implement their horrendous agenda. And just thinking about the worst possible things that they can do with that money. They're going to deploy not only against immigrants, they're going to deploy it against everyone.
Everybody, yeah.
Everybody who decides to speak up, it's going to become a target. It doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter what community they are. If they do decide to speak up, my fear is they're going to deploy it against them.
Okay, gang, take a knee. Things aren't looking so good for the old US of A right now. But I'm curious if there's anything that we can look to for hope right now.
One thing that is kind of like escaping also like the national media, national attention, is this natural growth and birth of community defense groups around the country. People are coming together to form these community organizations and entities and to protect their own communities. They're going out and patrolling their own community. If they see any ICE activity, they're publishing that information on their social media platforms. And that is super important. We're also seeing people in their own way fighting back against fascism, trying to prevent these kidnappings. And I feel the media is not doing a good job at capturing and covering those community-led efforts.
Right.
I'm wondering why. Like, is it because it might show that if we do come together, that if we do form these groups outside the establishment, that we have more power than we imagine? We can build connections and bridges with other social issues. What's happening to immigrants is not only an immigration issue, but it's also a healthcare issue. It's also a income inequality issue. It's also a reproductive issue. There's many undocumented women who are not able to access healthcare in many of these states because of their immigration status, that they feel that they might get targeted. And I feel like that's one thing that, at least at the federal level, at the national level, the media is not doing a good job at covering it. Like, they're putting a lot of emphasis on, the first reaction of people in LA when these ICE raids started in early June. And they're not focusing on the other things, the other incredible things that are happening. Like, people are also going out and trying to help their community members if they need groceries. They're giving their neighbors, rides to doctor's appointments or even to school. Like, there is hope in fighting back if we come together, if we support and love each other and fight for each other's rights.
You already know what I'm gonna say, right? How is this better? It's not. Immigration is a difficult conversation, globally at this point. And Justino is right. This isn't just a problem during Republican administrations. The plans suggested historically haven't been adequate in addressing any side of the issue. Fair, but mass deportations with zero consideration for humanity, for kindness, for contribution, for families is horrendous. There isn't a word bad enough for consciously creating concentration camps outside the bounds of the justice system. No charges brought in the year 2025. This is a dark moment in this country, reminiscent of Japanese internment, American slavery, Jim Crow, and more. And so it's kind of our moment to step in, step up, and elevate when we see pushback. I want more for this country, and I think you should too.